The weak are always the majority, and they are the creators of values. In other words, the morality we live by, the one that praises equality, humility, and safety, may not be the product of truth or strength, but of weakness, a quiet fear disguised as virtue. What if everything you were taught about progress, democracy, science, morality was a lie, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well? This is not the question of a pessimist. It's the question of a man staring directly into the soul of modern civilization and finding it hollow. We live in a world that prides itself on being enlightened. We have conquered disease, built machines to think for us, given every voice a platform, and called it freedom. Equality is praised, comfort is sold, and science, once a humble method, is now a kind of religion. We are told we are better now, kinder, smarter, more just. But if that's true, why do so many feel so numb? Friedrich Nietzsche believed he knew the answer. To him, modernity wasn't proof of our greatness. It was evidence of our exhaustion. The world hadn't become stronger. It had become safer, softer, and quietly sicker. He saw a civilization that had tamed itself so completely it had lost touch with what makes life worth living. Danger, struggle, creation, transcendence. To Nietzsche, we weren't thriving, we were decaying, slowly, politely, with smiles on our faces. The very things we celebrate, democracy, morality, rationality, were not marks of health, but symptoms of decline. This is the uncomfortable truth Nietzsche asks us to face. What if we've mistaken sedation for progress? Nietzsche believed that we have traded vitality for safety, that in our quest to eliminate pain, we have also eliminated the possibility of greatness. He called this decadence, not in the moral sense, but in the biological and cultural sense. A slow weakening of the human spirit, a civilization that survives but no longer thrives. To Nietzsche, comfort was not a reward, it was a trap. A society obsessed with ease and pleasure slowly loses its will, its drive to overcome, its hunger for transcendence. What once required courage, risk, and sacrifice, building nations, creating art, seeking truth, has now been replaced with convenience, efficiency, and mass appeal. We are kept safe, entertained, federal, but we are no longer tested. And Nietzsche saw this as dangerous because without resistance, the will to power atrophies. He looked at modern man and saw not a bold creator of meaning, but a tired, passive creature waiting for life to be delivered without struggle. Our morality now discourages ambition. Our politics reward obedience. Our culture glorifies healing, but no longer honors wounds. What does not kill me makes me stronger, Nietzsche wrote. But in a world designed to keep us from all harm, what strength is there left to build? We no longer sharpen ourselves against the edge of suffering. We dull ourselves against the cushions of luxury. Even in our language, we speak more of rights than responsibilities, more of peace than passion, more of comfort than confrontation. Nietzsche saw this as a spiritual illness, a collective decision to hide from the very things that give life its depth: pain, sacrifice, striving, not because we are evil, but because we are tired. And tired societies, Nietzsche warned, begin to rot from the inside. Comfort becomes sedative, equality becomes mediocrity, and progress becomes paralysis. This is the illness he diagnosed at the heart of modern life. Not a lack of resources or technology or intelligence, but a lack of will. And without the will to rise, we quietly begin to fall. Nietzsche feared not only the weakening of the individual, but the rise of something even more dangerous: the herd. In his eyes, the modern world was not built to elevate greatness. It was designed to protect the average. Democracy, morality, religion, these were not systems of truth, but systems of control. They were created by the many to defend themselves against the few, against those who thought differently, lived dangerously, reached higher. The herd does not value originality. It fears it. The herd does not reward strength. It neutralizes it. And so the individual is taught to conform, not through force, but through culture, through praise of sameness, through fear of standing out. We are told to be kind, to be humble, to fit in. And over time, we learn to suppress the very instincts Nietzsche believed made life beautiful: the will to rise, to rebel, to create. Morality, Nietzsche wrote, is the herd instinct in the individual. It teaches us to feel guilty for our ambition, ashamed of our power, suspicious of our own brilliance. The result is a society where excellence is suspect and mediocrity is safe, where being different is more dangerous than being wrong. In such a world, the overman, the individual who creates his own values, is seen not as a visionary, but as a threat. Nietzsche did not hate the people, but he refused to worship them. He believed the glorification of the herd, of majority opinion, of mass morality, would eventually lead to cultural stagnation. And perhaps we see this today, where online mobs dictate what can be said, where mass approval replaces thoughtful dissent, where the loudest voices drown out the wisest ones. We live in a world obsessed with numbers, likes, votes, consensus, but Nietzsche reminds us, truth is never democratic. Just because something is believed by many doesn't make it right. And just because something is rejected by the crowd doesn't make it wrong. The herd offers comfort, safety, stability, but it does not offer freedom. It does not offer truth. And it does not offer the courage to become something greater. To Nietzsche, this was the ultimate tragedy, that in our quest to protect ourselves from danger, we have protected ourselves from becoming. Nietzsche never denied the power of science. He respected logic. He admired precision. But he feared what would happen when a culture began to worship these things, when reason became the only lens through which we viewed the world. He saw this in his own time, a growing belief that science had all the answers, that truth could be measured, calculated, and predicted, and that anything which could not simply didn't matter. To Nietzsche, this was not enlightenment. It was reduction, the shrinking of life's mystery into a set of formulas. Science could explain how things worked, but not why they mattered. It could tell us the speed of light, the composition of stars, but not the value of courage, the meaning of suffering, or the purpose of love. We have art so that we may not perish from the truth, Nietzsche once said, because the truth, stripped of beauty, imagination, and depth, can become unbearable. Nietzsche believed that when science replaces philosophy and logic replaces myth, something is lost. The ability to feel truth, not just to define it. He feared the rise of a society that would scoff at poetry, dismiss art, and laugh at religion, not because these things are foolish, but because they are unquantifiable. In the rational world, what cannot be measured is seen as meaningless. But to Nietzsche, that was exactly the opposite of wisdom. He didn't reject science. He rejected scientism, the belief that the scientific method alone can explain all of life. He saw the human soul as something that couldn't be dissected, something that needed metaphor, not just measurement, suffering that needed meaning, not just medicine, a spirit that needed music, not just math. And he believed that when we try to replace spirit with logic, we don't become more human. We become less. We become machines, efficient, predictable, and hollow. In the name of progress, we lose our poetry. In the name of clarity, we silence mystery. Nietzsche warned that this would not elevate us. It would flatten us, make us clever, but not wise, capable, but not whole. And in doing so, we would forget the deeper question behind all others, not how to live, but why. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't celebrating. He was mourning, because he knew exactly what would follow: a crisis, a collapse. For centuries, Western civilization had anchored itself in God, in eternal truths, in sacred purpose. But as science advanced, as faith declined, as tradition faded into the background of modern life, that anchor came loose, and with it, the structure that gave life meaning began to drift. This is what Nietzsche called nihilism, not just the belief that life has no meaning, but the terrifying realization that all the old meanings have stopped working. No divine order, no ultimate justice, no cosmic reward for suffering, just a universe, indifferent. And for the modern soul, raised on moral certainty and comforting beliefs, this wasn't liberation. It was collapse. Nietzsche saw the rise of passive nihilism, a quiet despair, people numbing themselves with pleasure, escaping through distraction, avoiding the question, why are we here at all? He feared that modern man, having lost his higher purpose, would not rise to replace it, but would sink into apathy, routine, consumption, a life filled with activity, but hollow at the core. Man would rather will nothing, Nietzsche wrote, than not will at all. Because even meaningless suffering is easier to bear than the idea that nothing matters. This was Nietzsche's warning, that if we do not create new values, if we do not find new ways to live with passion and depth, then nihilism will swallow us, not with noise, but with silence, not through war, but through boredom. We will stop asking questions, stop reaching for greatness, and quietly disappear into comfort, compliance, and forgetfulness. And yet, Nietzsche did not give up. He believed this collapse could be the beginning of something greater, that in the death of the old gods, we could give birth to something new, that by facing the abyss, we might find the courage to climb. But first, we must confront the truth, that no one is coming to save us, and no meaning will be handed to us. We must become the creators of meaning. After tearing down the foundations of morality, religion, and science, Nietzsche does something unexpected. He offers not despair, but a challenge. In the ruins of meaning, he dares us to build again, not by returning to old gods or comforting lies, but by becoming something new. He calls this figure the Übermensch, often translated as the overman or the beyond man, not a superhero, not a tyrant, but an individual who has faced the abyss and chosen to create. The Übermensch is not given values, he invents them. He does not inherit meaning, he crafts it, like an artist sculpting form out of chaos. Nietzsche believed that art was the highest expression of the human will because art affirms life, even in its suffering. Where the scientist dissects and the priest obeys, the artist creates. The philosopher questions. The overman dares. He takes the raw materials of existence, pain, beauty, failure, joy, and shapes them into something greater. He does not retreat into comfort. He embraces risk, contradiction, and uncertainty because he understands. That is where truth is born. The overman lives beyond good and evil, not without ethics, but beyond borrowed ethics. He does not follow the herd. He dances alone, but not out of arrogance, out of necessity. Because to create something new, one must first walk through fire, through loneliness, doubt, and silence. You must have chaos within you, Nietzsche wrote, to give birth to a dancing star. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It is not easy, it is not safe, but it is free. Nietzsche's overman is not a destination. It is a direction, a call to rise again and again in a world with no script, to stop waiting for permission, to stop seeking validation, and to begin living as the author of one's own story. In the age of mass opinion, algorithmic thinking, and institutional comfort, this message is more radical than ever. To become what you are, to live deliberately, to create beauty, not because the world needs it, but because you do. This, Nietzsche believed, was the answer to nihilism. Not submission, not distraction, but the will to power. So, where does that leave us? In a world of endless progress, infinite choice, and constant noise. Nietzsche reminds us of something quietly radical. That comfort is not the highest good. That safety is not the same as freedom. And that meaning cannot be downloaded, inherited, or taught. It must be forged. He saw what we now live through daily, a society obsessed with avoiding discomfort, where every sharp edge is filed down, where every risk is managed, and every truth softened. But in doing so, something sacred is lost. The will to become. We are taught to be agreeable, to be liked, to follow. But Nietzsche asks, what if your soul longs for more than approval? What if your suffering is not a problem to be solved, but a path to be walked? What if greatness, creativity, and transcendence are waiting on the other side of discomfort? Live dangerously, he once said. Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius. Not because destruction is noble, but because a life lived too carefully is not lived at all. This is not a call to chaos. It is a call to courage, to step out of the herd, to face the abyss, to choose your values and bear their weight, to live a life that is not safe but true. Modernity gave us many gifts, but perhaps it also gave us illusions that we can have strength without struggle, depth without pain, purpose without sacrifice. Nietzsche didn't want to take away our comforts. He wanted to remind us that they are not enough. Not for a soul that yearns to rise, not for a mind that dares to think, not for a heart that longs to create. So if you feel the emptiness behind the noise, if you sense that you are meant for more than convenience, then you are not alone, and maybe, just maybe, you are ready not to follow, but to begin, to ask not, what is the meaning of life, but what meaning will I create